It is December. You are in church, so you know what that means. Time for a Christmas series, and we are kicking off our Christmas series. Time to talk about the incarnation, about God coming into the world in the person of a little baby named Jesus, born in a manger in Bethlehem to Mary and Joseph. And of course, Christians believe that that baby in the manger was the Messiah, the deliverer, the Savior of the world. And the Hebrew prophets of the Old Testament foretold the coming of the Messiah, and several of them gave us advanced warning, as it were, of the Christmas event so that we would understand what that's going to mean for the world. And so each Sunday this month, culminating on Christmas Eve, we're going to take a look at a different Old Testament prophet and see what he had to say about the Messiah and use that to prepare ourselves for the Advent season. Now, today we're going to start with the prophet Hosea, and I want to begin by just reading a passage. Actually, I'm going to read you the entire chapter. It's only 5 verses long, but Hosea chapter 3. Here it is. The Lord said to me, "Go again, love a woman who is loved by another man and is an adulteress, even as the Lord loves the children of Israel, though they turn to other gods and love cakes of raisins. So I bought her for 15 shekels of silver and a homer and a lethek of barley. And I said to her, you must dwell as mine for many days. You shall not play the whore or belong to another man, so will I also be to you. For the children of Israel shall dwell many days without king or prince, without sacrifice or pillar, without ephod or household gods. Afterward the children of Israel shall return and seek the Lord their God, and David their king, and they shall come in fear to the Lord and to his goodness in the latter days." Now, that's an odd Christmas story, isn't it? Some of you are thinking, what a bizarre way to start a talk about that sweet little baby Jesus in the manger. Oh my goodness, a sex scandal for Christmas. That doesn't go together. Well, but we're not going to go into that direction today, but I do want to ask you to be patient with me and come along as we unpack what Hosea has to tell us about the Messiah through his own broken marriage. And hopefully it'll all come together in the end. But there's 3 things I think that this text teaches us. First of all, that our relationship with God is like a marriage. Secondly, that our relationship with God is like a bad marriage. And then thirdly, we're going to see how God healed his marriage and what it cost him. So first of all, our relationship with God, this text is telling us, the whole book of Hosea is telling us, is like a marriage. Notice right there in the very beginning, verse 1, it says to Hosea, "Go, love a woman as I love the children of Israel." And the point of the book is this: just as you, Hosea, are married, God continually says, so I am married to my people. This is one of the main themes of the Hebrew Scriptures and the Hebrew prophets in particular. You see it all over the place. It's in Jeremiah 2 through 4. It's in Ezekiel chapter 16. It's all through the book of Isaiah. And it's here in the book of Hosea. And the theme is this: you cannot understand your relationship with God simply through the word picture of a king to his subjects, or to a father to his children, or to a shepherd to his flock. As helpful as all those metaphors are, and they're all very biblical, and they all tell us some good things, and yet they don't tell the whole story, because in a way they don't go deep enough to really tell us everything about what God seeks and what God wants in a relationship with us. Rather, this passage, that theme tells us that God wants a relationship with us so intensely, personally intimate, and at the same time so binding and enduring that he says you can't understand me. You cannot understand my love for you. You cannot understand our relationship unless you understand me as your bridegroom. It's not enough just to see me as your king, as your father, as your shepherd. You don't really know what our relationship is unless you understand and see me as your husband. So, Again, all throughout the Bible. For example, Isaiah chapter 54. God speaks to Israel, his people, and he says, "Do not be afraid, for your Maker is your husband. The Lord Almighty is his name. The Lord will call you back as if you were a wife deserted and distressed in spirit, a wife who married young, only to be rejected, says the Lord your God." And a few verses later, Isaiah chapter 62, it says this, "The Lord will take delight in you as a young man marries a maiden. As a bridegroom rejoices over his bride, so will your God rejoice over you." So what does this mean? What does it mean for God to say to us, you don't understand our relationship, you don't understand me, you don't understand the connection I want to have with you unless you understand it under this heading of marriage? Okay? Well, first of all, I think we need to understand what marriage is. It might be good in our culture to get a refresher on that real quick, but marriage is a relationship. It's a relationship of many things, but it is a relationship of three things in particular: a relationship of priority, intimacy, and a life-changing potency. So, first of all, marriage is a relationship of priority. If you are married, your relationship with your spouse has to be the number one priority in your life. Nothing can come before it, because marriage has a unique power. See, if your marriage is strong, it doesn't matter if everything in your life is weak. If your marriage is strong and yet the job's not going well, or there's a health crisis or the other thing, in a sense, it doesn't really matter, because you will walk into the world in strength. On the other hand, if your marriage is weak, even if everything else in your life is going great, it doesn't matter. You move out into the world in weakness. Marriage has that kind of power, because if you have it, marriage is the human relationship that sets the course for your life. So first of all, God says to you, I'm your husband. You have to understand that our relationship is like a marriage. What he's trying to say is, I'm the ultimate priority. He says, you can't know me as an add-on. I am not just an extra thing to get you over a hump. I'm not a vitamin supplement. Right? No, he says nothing can come before me. You've got to make me the priority of your life. Everything else is negotiable. Everything else comes second. So marriage is a relationship of priority. Secondly, though, marriage is a relationship of intimacy. Marriage is the most intimate human relationship, and in a couple of ways. One is knowledge. It is the relationship in which knowledge is the most intimate. The truth is, you can hide some things from your parents about who you really are. Somebody say amen. You know that. You can hide things from your friends about who you really are. You can hide things from your kids about who you really are. The reality is, you can actually hide some things from yourself about who you really are. But your spouse knows. She knows. He knows. Your spouse will see, because the relationship is so intimate. So it's intimate in knowledge, but it's also, of course, the most intimate in another sense of all human relationships. The depth and passion of the expressions of love are also the most intimate. And so when God says, I want a relationship with you that's like a marriage, what he is trying to say is, you can't know me from afar. You can't know me formally. I've got to be in every nook and cranny of your life, every inch of your life. There must be nothing that you hold back from me. You must be naked before me, totally vulnerable, he says. You can't just know about me. You have to experience my love, whatever else our relationship is, and it's many things. It has to be experiential. There has to be a real sense of my love on your heart. There has to be a real personal and experiential connection, God says, because we are married. So, it's a relationship of priority. It's a relationship of intimacy. But thirdly, as a result of those two, marriage is a relationship of life-changing potency. See, your spouse has, because of the nature of the relationship, has the ability to have a massive amount of power to essentially reprogram your self-view, your self-worth, your self-value. Actually has the ability to heal you in many ways. See, here's why. if somebody in this room were to come up to me after service and say, Pastor, you're just such a kind man, I would say, well, thank you. But I would also think, fooled you. Because I have cultivated this patient, gentle, pastoral demeanor, over the years, and that's what you see up here, not a thing. But you don't know how irritable I can be. You don't know, some of those things. Now, if my wife, if she were to say to me, you're about the kindest man I know, if she were to say that, if she were to say that, that would heal me, That would be amazing, because I can't say to her, oh, fooled you. Not after 22 years of marriage. You can't fool your spouse on something like that. See? In other words, your spouse has this just unbelievable ability to affirm and heal you of anything if they will use it. See, for example, if your spouse tells you you're beautiful, doesn't matter if everybody else thinks you're ugly, you'll feel beautiful. Of course, the opposite's true too. If they tell you you're ugly, that will sink in, and that will. The tongue has the power of life and death, the Scripture says, and their spouse wields that sword more powerfully than anybody else in your life. Your spouse has that kind of power. Your spouse's love and positive affirmation has that kind of power to change you, that kind of power to heal you. And so God is saying through this metaphor, listen, the most incredible moments in the most incredible marriages in the history of the world are just dim hints of my love for you. And if you grasp that, if you come to take hold of that both in your mind and also in your heart, it has the ability to bring this most life-changing potency into your life. Nothing could be more potent than that. God says, until you understand me, not just as a king, not just even as a father, not just as a shepherd, but as a husband and a bridegroom, he says, you have no idea who I am and what we could be together. So the first thing we see is our relationship with God is like a marriage. Okay? Second thing we learn through this book of Hosea, and in this passage we read this morning in particular, is that our relationship with God is like a bad marriage. All right? Let's delve into this Hosea story. In verse 1 that we read, Hosea says, the Lord said to me, go again, love a woman who's loved by another man and is an adulteress. Now here's what's happening. That word again refers us back to chapter 1. It refers us to the very beginning of the book, which also begins with God saying to Hosea, go. Okay, let's look at it. Hosea chapter 1, verse 2. When the Lord began to speak through Hosea, the Lord said to him, go, marry a promiscuous woman and have children with her, for like an adulterous wife, this land is guilty of unfaithfulness to the Lord. An adulterous wife. I put out on Twitter this week that I was looking for a title for a Christmas series on Hosea. Got some interesting responses. Somebody suggested using a song title for Christmas. I saw mommy kissing everyone. That could have been the dynamic. I settled on Ho-Ho-Hosea, because that's a triple word play there. That's a triple word score. But because what God is actually saying, though, is this. And he's saying, Hosea, here's the woman for you. I have picked out this woman for you, and I want you to know she is going to absolutely break your heart. She is going to trample on your heart. She is going to betray you. She is going to be unfaithful to you. And I want you to marry her. Why? Why? Well, God explains that he is going to teach Israel a lesson about his love through this little drama. And you can just imagine Hosea going, could I just write the play? Do I have to star in it? Do I really? But we've got to understand what's going on. From the whole perspective of this book, there are really two reasons why God would say to Hosea, no, you've got to actually carry this out. Go marry this woman who's going to utterly break your heart, utterly be unfaithful to you. One reason is so that God could get redemptive energy into Gomer's life. That's her name. His wife, which she most desperately needs to get that redemptive power into her life through Hosea. But the other reason is God is saying to Hosea, hey, you're a prophet. Right? This is your job. Your job is to understand me and to know who I am so that you can communicate to other people and bring the knowledge of God into the lives of other people and change them. And guess what, buddy? This is how you're going to become a prophet. Because you do not understand me and you don't understand what it's like to love human beings. You don't understand sin. You don't understand grace. You don't understand my nature. You don't understand human nature until you have experienced what I have experienced, until you have experienced the person that you love more than anybody else in the world utterly betray you. This is how you're going to become a great prophet, how you're going to become a great preacher, how you're going to become a great communicator who's able to touch other people's lives. But you're first going to have to go through what I'm going through. So we're told in chapter 1, Hosea did marry her. And they had 3 children, by the way, 2 sons and a daughter. That's a whole other story. We might come back to that sometime. You know what he named the 3rd child? We talk about what a great name Jameson was. He named his 3rd child Lo-Ami. Before you add it to your hipster baby name list, you want to know what it means? Not mine. Oh. Because she immediately began to be unfaithful to him. And then, after that, she actually left him with 3 kids and went to move in with her lover. And then she went to other lovers. And it got worse and worse until you read chapter 2. It's fascinating. But in chapter 2, she actually becomes a prostitute. And we say, oh my goodness. How much further could she fall? I mean, how much worse could it get? But it does get worse. Because here we've read in chapter 3 that she's for sale. How did this happen? And you know, the text doesn't tell us for certain, but you know, it could have been a couple of reasons. One, we do know that she is living with another lover. Okay, she's with another man. And so he has put her up for sale. And there's a couple of reasons that could be. One, it could be that she's just in debt, and he didn't want to be responsible for her and pay her debt. So that is one way you could wind up in slavery in the ancient world, is through indebtedness. Or it could be that he was a pimp, and that she has lost her marketability, and he's looking to recoup his losses, cut his losses. But this is bad. See, it's as far down as a person can fall. It's as bad as it can be. She's as broken as she can be. She's as miserable as she can be. So there's Hosea's really bad marriage. And God says, that is an image of what my relationship with human beings is like. Because he says, love a woman who is loved by another man and is an adulteress, even as the Lord loves the children of Israel, though they turn to other gods and love the cakes of raisins. The cakes of raisins, by the way, that were delicacies that were served at feast for idols. It's a very specific cultural. Don't worry about your raisin brand. You're fine. You're fine. No raisins in our fruitcake this week. No. It's a very specific cultural dynamic. But when God says your marriage, your bad marriage, your betrayal, when your wife goes out and puts herself into the arms of another, that's exactly what happens. When I love my people and I love human beings and they put other things before me and they worship other gods before me, that's exactly the same thing. When God says this, and that's, by the way, one of the great themes of the Old Testament. He is telling us when he says this 2 things about himself, and they're very important for us to understand. First of all, he's telling us you do not understand the impact of wrongdoing on your God until you understand this image. See, when a king sees a citizen break a rule that he's put in place, well, that makes him mad. When a shepherd sees a sheep wander off, they think, oh, again, that's frustrating. As a parent, when a father sees a child disobey his instructions, that's very frustrating. Could make you angry. When the person you love most in your life is putting himself or herself into the arms of another lover, that's different. And God says, until you understand that. And listen, I know some of you have walked through that. You know, at least most of us here know someone that's walked through this. Maybe know someone very very closely. You know, and yet God says, until you have been through that, or you know someone who has been through that, you don't understand the impact of your wrongdoing and your coldness and your waywardness on me. So that's the first thing we learn about God. The second thing we're learning is that you don't understand yourself. And here's why. When you read about Gomer in chapter 2, you can see she's out of control. She's basically a sex addict. She's out of control. She can't stop herself. And when God talks about this image, when he calls to his people and says, you're like a bride who has gone away from me, it's extremely interesting. But he often uses this same way of talking. Okay? So in the prophet Jeremiah, that's another one where you see this. Jeremiah chapters 2, 3, and 4, God speaks with anguish to his people. I'll cobble together a few passages. I don't have time to go through the whole thing. But he says, O Jerusalem, I remember how as a bride you loved me, but you said, I will not serve you. Does a maiden forget her jewelry and a bride her wedding ornaments? Yet my people have forgotten me, days without number. By the roadside you sat, waiting for lovers. You ran after other gods until your feet were bare and your throat was dry. But you said, it's no use. I love foreign gods. I can't help it. I must go after them. But can the gods you made for yourselves save you when you're in trouble? Here's the climax, Jeremiah 4, verse 30. What are you doing, you devastated one? Why dress yourself in scarlet and put on jewels of gold? Why highlight your eyes with makeup? You adorn yourself in vain. Your lovers despise you. They want to kill you. Here's what God is saying. What does it mean to follow another god? It means when something is more important in your life. Listen, if making money turns your crank more than God, if that's more important to your self-esteem, if that's more important to who you are, if that gives you more joy and more security than your relationship with God, see, if having children, if getting married, if being married, if your looks, if your achievements, if your grades, if your job title, if any great political cause. See, if there's anything more important than God in your life, that is your real God. And here's what God is saying. You know what sex addicts are like. You know something about sexual addiction. Sexual addiction is that you have an inner emptiness, and because of that inner emptiness, you are driven towards the false intimacies of various sorts of sexual practices which don't satisfy. See, and so you run after these things, and they scratch that itch momentarily, but then it takes more of the thing to get less. That's how addiction works. More of the thing to get less of the response. And God has the audacity here to say, if you make anything more important to me, your career or a good cause or your family or being married or trying to get married, he says you're doing the same thing with your soul that a sex addict is doing with their body. You're putting yourself in the arms of something. And you've got to have it, because if you don't have the money, or if you don't have the love, or if you don't have the romance, or if you don't have whatever it is that's so important to you, more important than God, you're addicted. So you've given yourself to it. It's your lover. But he says, but your lover despises you. What's he saying? He's saying they cannot save you. They're just idols. They didn't create you. I created you. They can't save you. Only I can save you. You're a slave. How is your money going to save you when you lose it? Which is constantly happening. It can't. It can only, in a sense, curse you by its absence. God says, only I can save you. If you build your life on anything else, listen, if you build your life on an individual, as good as he or she may be, maybe you got married, you didn't get a Gomer, you got Prince Valiant, you got the real deal. But what are you going to do when that person dies? And they always die. See, your idols can't save you. Your lovers, in a sense, seek your life. They can't help you when your heart is broken. And God says, until you understand the absolute devastation of having the person you love betray you, be unfaithful to you don't understand how I feel about your waywardness, about your sin, and you don't understand about your own heart. You don't understand how addicted, how enslaved you are to other things besides me that can never save you anyway, that will only drive you into the ground. So our relationship with God is like a marriage, but our relationship with God is like a bad marriage. But thirdly, we learn here how God healed his marriage and ultimately what it cost him. Let's look first at how he told Hosea to do it. Remember in verse 1 it starts, the Lord said to me, go again. Okay, she's left him. She's been a prostitute. She's up for sale. And God says, go again. What's God saying here? He's saying, Hosea, buddy, you get 1,000 reasons for divorce, but don't do that. Okay, let's go get her. Now, listen, and some people, making a mistake, look at this and say, oh, I see what this is saying. This is trying to say there's no such thing as ground for divorce, right? That no matter what, you always have to fight for the marriage, you always have to work the marriage. No. There's plenty of places in the Bible that say there are grounds for divorce. But I got to tell you, that's missing the whole point of the story. And Hosea would be very cross with you, by the way. Because Hosea is only reason he's going through this is to point to God and show you the nature of God and to show you the nature of God's salvation. He's not just an inspiring example. Okay, now can we learn some things from the story of Hosea about not giving up too soon and about, how you can learn about how to heal a relationship? Yeah, sure. But that's not the point of Hosea. And he would be very upset if you looked at him as this inspiring example of love conquers all. That is not what this is saying. He's saying God conquers all. See, and God says, let's show the world what I am like. So go get her. So he does. Verse 2 starts, so I bought her. 4 little words. But so much impact, so much pathos, so much pain. Do you know what that must mean? From what we can tell, Israel in the 8th century BC, which is when both Hosea and Amos, they're kind of sister prophets, when they were speaking, Israel had really decayed spiritually and morally and culturally and was pretty much just like all the pagan nations that surrounded her, and had therefore adopted many of the pagan customs of the nations around it. And therefore, it's a very, very good chance that what we're seeing here in Hosea chapter 3 is a public slave auction. That Gomer was being auctioned off as a slave in the public marketplace. We also know that she was likely stripped naked, or at least virtually naked. People had to see what they were getting. So she's up for sale. And the bidding starts, and it's not hard to imagine that she might have had her eyes closed. It's not much, but it's the one thing she's got to kind of shield herself from this greatest moment of tragedy in her life. Just something to get some little level of human dignity. And she begins to hear the voices cry out. 2 shekels. 5 shekels. And she hears one of the voices, and she says, that's the voice of my husband. What's he doing here? How after all I've put him through, why would he be there? And then he goes 10, 12, 13, 15. 15 in a lethak. 15 in a sheath of barley, which 15 shekels in a sheath of barley works out to about 30 shekels, which they say is about the average price paid for a slave. Sold to Hosea. And he would have come up then onto that stage and covered up her nakedness, put a cloak around her and led her away. And she's got to be thinking, why on earth would he be here? And we could imagine that maybe the first thought she thought was, I know why. Revenge. Now he can do anything he wants to me. Now he owns me. I see how this is going to go. But, verse 3 shows us, no, he speaks tenderly to her. Now, I tell you, this verse is very difficult to translate. There's just no English translation really gets it right. I worked out a lot with the commentaries. There is a Jewish translation that I think gets closest to it. It says this, "Then I told her, you are to remain in seclusion for a long time and be mine. You are not to be a prostitute, and you're not to be with any man, and I won't come in and have sex with you either." Now, a couple things to notice here about this. First, he says, you are to be mine. He says, no, I don't want you as a slave. I want you as my wife. I want to build a home again. I want to have a life together with you. So that's the first thing. But secondly, he says, however, for a set period of time, for many days, you will have sex with no man, including me. Now, you know what he's saying here? He says, I want to rebuild our lives together, but there's going to be a period in which we don't get back together, but we're going to do the hard work of going back through everything that has happened. And then I will indeed be yours. Not just you will be mine. I'm the husband here. I bought you. No. I will be yours. The Hebrew syntax is clearly this mutual dynamic. You will be mine, and I will be yours. But see, Hosea doesn't have any of this naive, sentimental, oh, God will just make everything okay. No. This is not the Hallmark Channel, all right? No, he's paying a price here. Look, he's already paid the financial price. The reality is he's also likely paid a substantial cultural and social price. Can you imagine just the people in that community seeing him? All right, listen, just think about what happens when a public figure has an affair and his wife chooses to stay with him. How often we throw her under the bus? I can't believe she hadn't had more strength than that. I do, Oh, in this culture, this long ago, a man, and you're going to take her back? After what she did to you, it's embarrassing, it's shameful. So he's paying the price financially, he's paying the price socially, but most of all, he's paying the price emotionally. He's basically what we would do today, what we call today, doing deep emotional work. What he's saying is, I've been hurt. I can't just crawl back into bed with you. We got a lot of work to do, but I'm going to pay the price so that eventually I shall be yours. And even though it's one of these stories, the text doesn't tie it up in a nice ribbon. We don't know how the story ends. But, the fact that this relationship between Hosea and Gomer has come down all this time later through the ages of one of the great stories of Israel and God and that dynamic, means that probably, I believe, that finally Gomer found rest in her husband's love. But this still raises a bit of a problem for us, doesn't it? Look, the whole idea is that Hosea is an image, a representation of God. Hosea is to, anybody SAT getting ready? This is like, this is to that. Hosea is to God as God is to. So, Hosea was in love. God is in love. Hosea has been betrayed. God has been betrayed. Hosea pays an enormous price to get her back. But where would God, wait a minute, where does that happen for God? Now, right away, I want you to realize something. That, first of all, if you love a person who has no problems, okay, and there are 5 or 6 of them in the world, go grab one, because that's easy. Very easy to love somebody with no problems. But to love anyone with a problem involves a substitutionary sacrifice. Let me explain what I mean by this. Let's imagine that you have a friend. What if you have a friend and she is going through just a horrible time, her life is just falling apart, and she desperately needs somebody to listen to her, just needs somebody to talk to about her problems. She's lonely, she's weeping, and you think, all right, if I go see her, there goes my evening. I'm going to get involved, and it's just going to make me feel bad. Look, it's her or it's you. You can have your evening, you can keep yourself emotionally untapped, and she will just sink further and further. Or you can go by, and when you're done at the end of the evening, she feels so much better, and you feel so much worse, right? But that's the way it is. That's the way it always is. There is no way for you to love a weak person without some of their weakness coming over onto you and some of your strength going over onto them. That's just the way it works. All love of anyone with any kind of need is a form of substitutionary sacrifice. Okay? Hosea loves, and it shows that it costs. So how does God pay a price for us? You know, even though this is an Old Testament story, these are the Hebrew scriptures, and yet this book is just crying out with the question, where does God come into the marketplace? Where does God pay the price to get his people back? And the answer is in verses 4 and 5. Okay, and it's cryptic, because it's a prophecy, it's supposed to be cryptic. But it says that there's going to be a period of time, there in verse 4, in which Israel is cold and away from everything. But eventually, verse 5, it says, afterward, the children of Israel shall return and seek the Lord their God. The relationship is healed. And David their king. Wait a minute. David their king. I don't know how well you know your history. David's been dead for quite some time when this story is written. David's dead. This must be talking about a descendant of David. And it is. Because when they asked Jesus Christ in Matthew chapter 9, Jesus, how come your disciples don't fast? It says this, Jesus answered, how can the guests of the bridegroom mourn while he is with them? The time will come when the bridegroom will be taken away from them, then they will fast. The bridegroom. Jesus is calling himself the bridegroom. And listen, everybody in Israel knew that the bridegroom was the Lord himself. It's God, and Jesus Christ is saying, yep, I'm the bridegroom. But soon I will be taken away, and then they will fast and mourn. I'm the bridegroom, but I've come to die. And there's the answer to the riddles. In Jesus Christ, at Christmas, at the incarnation, a son of David, God entered the world. He entered the marketplace, and he clothed us, covering our nakedness with his righteousness. Because on the cross, Jesus Christ paid the price to buy us away from our enslavements. So when God has the audacity to say, listen, I'm like that bridegroom that when he sees the bride coming, have you ever, I was at a wedding Friday afternoon, and it's always, you see the bride coming down. I'm lucky. I often get the best view in the house, because as a minister, I get to stand down front, and I get to see her the whole way coming. I've never seen a bride that wasn't beautiful, radiant, glorious. And that groom, sometimes I gotta hold them back. You know, they just want to, because you just think, I want to grab her and take her up in my arms and give her everything and lay my life down for her. God says, I'm really like that bridegroom. God says, that's not just a rhetoric with me. That's not just a metaphor. In Jesus Christ, I did that. I laid down my life for you. I did the thing cosmically and visibly that you have to do every time you love somebody that has needs. It was a substitutionary sacrifice. Your sin, your evil, your problems, your addictions came onto me so that my righteousness could come onto you. God says, do you understand that? Now you understand how much I love you. Now you understand how much I delight in you. And to the degree that you take that knowledge, to the degree that you get that into the center of your being, that is the most life-changing potency that you can have in the entire universe. That is the thing that will set you free. We're going to close, but let me suggest something real quick. 3 things. Are you here this morning, and are you suffering? Are you going through something and you say, God, why is this happening to me? I'm I'm miserable. Nothing's working out the way, everything's going wrong. Are you in the middle of just this cataclysmic meltdown of all your hopes and dreams? Can I suggest maybe God is trying to turn you into a prophet? Maybe God is trying to get you to understand something of his nature that he wants to use to be a blessing and a help to others. But there are some things that you can't minister to others until you've walked through them yourself. That's how he did it with Hosea. Number 2, are you here and you're unmarried? Let me say something to the singles here. Are you here and you're unmarried and you're really afraid of marriage? Oh, I don't want to give up and get and my parents and I've seen. Or are you here and you're unmarried and you are so desperate to get married that you're just incredibly upset that you're not? In other words, are you under wanting marriage or over wanting marriage? Jesus Christ looks at you and he says, listen, until you understand that I'm the only spouse that you ever really need, that I am the only groom, I am the only spouse who can ever really satisfy you down to the core. That our wedding day, yours and mine, that's going to take place at the end of time, is the only wedding day that will ever really fill you to the corners of your being. And that awaits you. Until you understand that and you understand my spousal love, Jesus says, you're always going to be either under wanting or over wanting marriage. Not only that, if you're married, the married folks in the house, if you're married and you don't have Jesus' spousal love, can I say with all respect, you're going to be a lousy spouse. Because you're either going to look at your spouse and insist that your spouse meet all of your emotional needs. And that's too much weight for any human being to carry. You'll crush them under that weight. Or you'll just become cynical and bitter. And Jesus Christ says, I'm the only spouse you need. And until you have me, you'll either be poorly married or poorly unmarried. And last of all, do you really, really, really have Jesus Christ as your spouse? Or is he just some kind of boss? Is he just some kind of, king to make sure you follow all the rules? If you want to experience his love in your life, if you want that life-changing potency, if you want to be free from the addictions and the enslavements, then what you have to do is you have to make your vow to the Lord. Or you have to remake your vow. That's what communion is. That's what the Lord's Supper is. And that's what we're going to do this morning. We're going to close out with communion because this is a way that we take these elements, this bread and this cup, and we say, I, believer, take you, God, to be my wedded spouse. This is what this is. I'm going to pray at the end of this, but right now I'm going to invite the band to come back up, and they're going to play a song. The usher's going to get ready to come, and they're going to distribute these elements to us. And again, I want to explain what this is. Some of you may be new to Christianity, new to faith, new to this kind of dynamic. And this is not magic. Okay? There's nothing magic about this. This is a symbol. Okay, it's symbolic of what Christ has done for you. Now, it's an important symbol. I wear this wedding ring on my hand, and Deanna put it on there 22 years ago. It didn't make me married, If I were to take it off, and I'm too fat, I can't anymore. That's a defense mechanism. I've gained weight for the sake of my marriage, because sacrifices, yes. But if I could take it off, I wouldn't cease to be married. It's just a symbol. Well, maybe not just a symbol. If I just took it off and threw it away, Deanna would be quite upset with me, and understandably so. This is a symbol, but it's not just a symbol. It's a symbol that reminds us every time we take this bread and we take this cup that we have married God. There was a ceremony. We have said, listen, this is not... You're already a Christian. If Paul says, if you confess with your mouth that Jesus is Lord and you believe in your heart God raised him from the dead, you'll be saved. That's your wedding vows to God. Okay. But this is a renewal. This is a reminder. This is like your anniversary when you stop to go, you know, boy, I should tell you I love you every day, but today of all days, I just really want to focus in on that. And so that's what this is. And so as the band plays a song and you receive these elements, just hold on to them. Okay, hold on to them. We're going to take them all together. I'll come back and we'll take them all together because it's communion. We're going to take them in community all together. But as you sit there and this song is playing, let this be your moment to focus in on what Christ has done for you and renew that marriage vow that you have with God. Ask Him to work out. Where's your unfaithfulness? Where's your addictions? Where's your enslavements? Ask Him to love those things out of you. Okay, so ushers, distribute this. When they're done, we'll come back. We'll all take